The letter arrived in a small German village in early 1944, postmarked from Texas. The handwriting belonged to Hans Müller, a Wehrmacht corporal captured in Tunisia the previous year. His mother opened it with trembling hands, expecting news of suffering and deprivation. Instead, she read something that seemed impossible. "Dear Mother, I know you won't believe this, but I have gained 20 pounds since becoming a prisoner. We eat 3 hot meals every day. There is meat at almost every meal. Yesterday we had ice cream. Real ice cream, Mother. I haven't seen ice cream since before the war started. They sell it at the camp store for 10 cents. With my work wages, I can afford it twice a week. Please don't worry about me. I am eating better here than I did in the Wehrmacht. Better, I must confess, than I ate at home before the war. Your loving son, Hans." This letter, one of thousands like it that filtered back to Germany through Red Cross channels, told a story that contradicted everything Nazi propaganda had promised. Over 400,000 German prisoners of war held in camps across the United States discovered an America that wasn't supposed to exist, wealthy beyond measure, generous to enemies, and capable of producing abundance that German industry couldn't match even in peacetime. These child prisoners of war, many barely old enough to shave, would be transformed not by harsh treatment, but by kindness, not by propaganda, but by the simple reality of 3 meals a day, hot showers, and the shocking discovery that in America, even prisoners ate like civilians, and civilians ate like kings. The first German POWs to arrive in America came from North Africa in 1943, veterans of Rommel's Africa Corps who had surrendered in Tunisia. These were hardened soldiers who had endured the Western Desert Campaign, fighting in temperatures that reached 50 degrees Celsius, surviving on meager rations that barely sustained life. Water had been more precious than ammunition. Food consisted of hard biscuits, tinned meat that had often spoiled in the heat, and ersatz coffee made from roasted acorns. Fresh vegetables were memories. Fruit was a luxury reserved for officers. Many of these men had lost significant weight during the African campaign, their bodies weakened by malnutrition, dysentery, and the relentless sun. When they surrendered to Allied forces in May 1943, these Africa Corps veterans expected the worst. Nazi propaganda had taught them that Americans were weak and decadent, but also that they were cruel to prisoners, that Jews controlled their government and would seek revenge, that starvation awaited anyone captured by the Western Allies. The reality began to demolish these beliefs within hours. American field commanders, following Geneva Convention protocols, provided captured soldiers with K rations, the same emergency meals American troops carried. These rations, which American soldiers routinely complained as barely adequate, seemed like feasts to Germans who had survived on minimal supplies for months. The K rations contained items the Germans hadn't seen in years: chocolate bars, instant coffee, processed cheese, crackers with actual flavor, fruit bars, and cigarettes. One captured German soldier later testified, "We opened the American rations and thought there had been a mistake. This couldn't be emergency food. There was too much of it, and it was too good. We thought maybe it was a special meal before interrogation to make us cooperative. We didn't understand that this was what American soldiers complained as insufficient." The journey to America aboard Liberty ships provided the next shock. The German POWs expected to be crammed into holds like cargo, with minimal food and water for the Atlantic crossing. Instead, they found themselves treated as human beings rather than enemies. The ships had been designed for troop transport, with proper bunks, ventilation, and sanitation facilities. Naval records show that prisoner rations during the crossing matched those provided to American crews, approximately 3,500 calories daily, including fresh bread baked on ship, meat, vegetables, real coffee with sugar and milk available, and on some vessels, ice cream served on special occasions. The USS General Stewart's log from July 1943 records that German POWs were served ice cream on July 4th, made fresh using the ship's ice cream maker.
For men who hadn't tasted ice cream since before the war, if they had ever tasted it at all, this frozen dessert in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean was incomprehensible. One prisoner interviewed decades later remembered, "I thought the Americans were playing some kind of joke on us. Ice cream in the middle of the ocean during a war? It made no sense. Where did they get the ice, the milk, the sugar? How could they waste resources on frozen dessert for prisoners while fighting a global war?" That's when I first understood that everything we had been told about America was a lie. When the ships docked at American ports, Norfolk, Newport News, New York, the prisoners encountered their first glimpse of the American home front. The docks themselves were revelations of industrial capacity. The Norfolk Naval Base covered over 4,000 acres and handled more cargo in a single day than major German ports managed in a week. Prisoners watching the loading and unloading operations saw mechanization and efficiency that German logistics had never achieved. Cranes moved hundreds of tons hourly. Trains shuttled supplies continuously. And everywhere, abundance: crates of food, barrels of oil, mountains of equipment, all moving with clockwork precision. At the base exchanges, shops for dock workers and naval personnel, prisoners glimpsed through windows displays of consumer goods that had vanished from German shops years earlier. Candy bars in dozens of varieties lined the shelves. Hershey bars, Milky Ways, Snickers, Baby Ruth, Butterfinger, all selling for 5 cents each. The prisoners had been taught that America was on the verge of collapse, starving because of the naval blockade that German U-boats had supposedly established. The shelves of candy told a different story. The train journey inland to prison camps continued the education. Unlike the cattle cars used for transporting prisoners in Europe, German POWs traveled in passenger coaches. Many trains had dining cars that served full meals. Documented menus from summer 1943 show fried chicken, mashed potatoes, vegetables, pie, and coffee. This wasn't special treatment for prisoners, it was standard American rail service, the kind of meal any civilian could purchase. The prisoners watched out the windows as America passed by. Endless farmland, vast cities, factories running at full capacity, automobiles everywhere. One prisoner remembered, "We had been told that American industry was primitive, that they couldn't manufacture quality products, that their society was falling apart. But what we saw was a country that worked. The trains ran on time, the roads were paved, the farms stretched to the horizon, and nobody looked hungry." The prison camps themselves violated every expectation. Camp Crossville in Tennessee, Camp Hearn in Texas, Camp Alva in Oklahoma, and hundreds of others provided accommodations that met or exceeded Geneva Convention requirements. The barracks had electric lights, hot running water, flush toilets, and central heating. These were amenities that many German soldiers had never enjoyed at home. Hans Wacker, a former POW who returned to the United States after the war and became a physician, recalled, "Many of us came from cold water flats in German cities. We had never lived in places with hot water from taps. The American camps had showers with hot water available every day. We could bathe in hot water whenever we wanted. This was luxury beyond anything we had known."
But the camp's most powerful impact came from the PX stores, the camp exchanges, where prisoners could purchase items using wages earned from work details. According to Army quartermaster records, these exchanges stocked an array of products that seemed impossible to men who had lived under wartime rationing for years. Coca-Cola sold for 5 cents. Pepsi, Dr. Pepper, and RC Cola were also available. Candy bars in multiple varieties cost a nickel each. Cigarettes were plentiful. Fresh fruit was regularly available. Beer, real beer, not the weak substitutes Germans had endured, sold for reasonable prices. And in camps with adequate refrigeration, ice cream could be purchased in various flavors. Prisoners earned 80 cents per day for labor, later increased to $1. A day's wages could buy 16 candy bars or 16 bottles of Coca-Cola. For Germans who had lived under severe rationing, where such products were unavailable at any price, this casual abundance was revolutionary. Coca-Cola became symbolic of everything the prisoners were discovering about American industrial capacity. The soft drink, virtually unknown in Germany before the war, was ubiquitous in America. Every camp received regular deliveries. Prisoners observed that Americans of all ages and social classes drank it casually, often discarding half-empty bottles without thought. The standardization impressed technically minded prisoners. Coca-Cola tasted identical whether consumed in Maine or Texas. This quality control exceeded anything German industry had achieved. The logistics of manufacturing syrup concentrate in Atlanta and distributing it nationwide to thousands of bottling plants represented coordination that challenged Nazi assumptions about American chaos and inefficiency. Company records show that larger camps received weekly deliveries of 200 to 300 cases, each containing 24 bottles. Some camps consumed over 7,000 bottles weekly during summer months. Prisoners calculated, if prison camps alone consumed this much Coca-Cola, how much did the entire nation drink? The number suggested an economy operating at levels of production that made German industrial capacity seem primitive by comparison. Ice cream delivered perhaps the deepest psychological impact. One captured POW later recalled gaining from 128 pounds to 185 pounds during 2 years in American captivity, joking that I had gotten so fat you could no longer see my eyes. Army records confirm that camps with adequate refrigeration served ice cream regularly during summer months. The military considered ice cream so essential for morale that specialized ships were built for the Pacific Fleet specifically to manufacture and deliver it to combat zones. At Camp Shelby, Mississippi, the July 4, 1943 celebration included fresh ice cream made on site using hand-cranked freezers. Prisoners watched as Americans used ice in July in Mississippi, along with cream, sugar, and flavorings to make entertainment food. The casual use of resources that Germans considered desperately scarce demonstrated priorities that the prisoners couldn't initially comprehend. Why would anyone use cream and sugar, items strictly rationed in Germany, to make frozen dessert? The answer was they slowly realized that in America these ingredients weren't scarce. There was enough cream and sugar to use them for pleasure rather than mere survival. By 1944, many camps had electric ice cream makers. The varieties available, chocolate, vanilla, strawberry, butter pecan, strawberry, exceeded what German ice cream parlors had offered before the war. Prisoners could purchase ice cream bars for 10 cents or cups of various flavors. Army procurement records show larger camps ordering 50 to 100 gallons weekly during summer months. One prisoner from Bavaria, where ice cream had been a rare treat before the war, wrote home, "Mother, you won't believe me, but we have ice cream twice a week here. Real ice cream, made with real cream and real sugar. I know you haven't seen cream in years. Here they use it to make dessert for prisoners. I don't understand this country, but I'm beginning to think we never should have gone to war with it." Sugar consumption in the camps provided constant education in abundance. In Germany, sugar was strictly rationed to civilians at minimal amounts monthly. In American camps, sugar sat in bowls on mess hall tables for unlimited use. Quartermaster records show camps receiving 100-pound bags of refined white sugar weekly. Camp bakeries used sugar liberally in cakes, cookies, and pies that appeared regularly on menus. Prisoners sweetened coffee and tea without restriction. One documented incident from Camp Aliceville, Alabama, illustrated the gulf between German and American attitudes toward resources. In August 1943, humid weather caused several hundred pounds of sugar to harden, making it difficult to pour. Rather than steam and reprocess it, as Germans certainly would have done, American kitchen staff simply discarded it and ordered fresh supplies. German prisoners working in the kitchen were reportedly distressed by this waste of a resource their families desperately needed. American chocolate consumption patterns revealed what the prisoners came to call democratic abundance, the idea that luxury goods were available not just to elites but to everyone. Major manufacturers, Hershey, Mars, Nestle, produced millions of bars monthly despite wartime conditions. The military alone purchased over 380 million pounds of chocolate products during the war years. Prison camp exchanges stocked multiple varieties: standard Hershey bars, Mars bars, emergency chocolate bars, and various candy bars containing chocolate, all priced between 5 and 10 cents. Prisoners discovered that Americans had preferences among brands, casually choosing one chocolate over another based on personal taste rather than availability. This concept, having enough of a product to choose based on preference rather than scarcity, was foreign to men who had learned to accept whatever was available, if anything was available at all. Red Cross packages distributed monthly to prisoners drove the point home further. These parcels, prepared and shipped by the Red Cross American Red Cross, contained items that exceeded what German civilians received as basic rations: chocolate or candy bars, instant coffee, processed cheese, crackers, canned meat, cigarettes, and soap. These packages supplemented regular camp rations, providing luxury items that many prisoners hadn't seen in years. The concept that a charitable organization could afford to give prisoners luxuries while the nation fought a global war challenged fundamental Nazi teachings about American weakness and resource scarcity.
Thanksgiving 1944 introduced German prisoners to American holiday traditions and the national coordination of abundance they represented. Army records confirm that all prison camps served traditional Thanksgiving dinners: roast turkey with stuffing, mashed potatoes and gravy, sweet potatoes, cranberry sauce, vegetables, pumpkin pie, and coffee with milk. The logistics of providing turkey dinners to 425,000 POWs, plus millions of American servicemen worldwide, showcased organizational capacity that dwarfed anything Germany had attempted. The fact that enemy prisoners received the same meal as American soldiers emphasized equality of treatment that contradicted Nazi racial hierarchy. One Austrian prisoner wrote, "They fed us turkey like we were guests rather than enemies. The turkey was real, not ersatz. The potatoes had butter. The pie had real fruit. I kept wondering when the meal would be taken away, when they would tell us it was a mistake. But they didn't. We ate until we were full, and there was still food left over." That's when I understood that America hadn't just won the war militarily, they had won it economically, years before the first shot was fired. Christmas 1944 brought unexpected generosity from American civilians that deeply affected the prisoners. Church groups, civic organizations, and individuals sent packages to German POWs. Local communities near camps often provided additional support. In Tonkawa, Oklahoma, townspeople delivered homemade treats to the camp. In Hearne, Texas, church groups brought Christmas cookies and candy. This civilian kindness toward enemies challenged Nazi ideology fundamentally. Americans who had family members fighting against Germany nevertheless showed charity to German prisoners, demonstrating strength through mercy rather than vengeance. One prisoner later testified, "The American civilians brought us Christmas gifts. Their sons were fighting in Europe, maybe dying at the hands of German soldiers. And yet these people brought cookies and candy to German prisoners. We couldn't understand it at first. We thought it might be a trick. But it wasn't. They genuinely wanted us to have a better Christmas." That's when many of us stopped being Nazis. You can't hate people who show you kindness when they have every reason to seek revenge. As the war continued and labor shortages intensified, increasing numbers of German prisoners worked outside camps, gaining first-hand knowledge of American food production. By 1944, approximately 100,000 prisoners worked in agriculture and food processing. In Michigan orchards, prisoners picked cherries destined for maraschino production, those bright garnishes for ice cream sundaes. The volume staggered them. Single orchards produced tons of fruit just for decorative purposes. At canneries, prisoners observed quality control that rejected perfectly edible food for minor imperfections. One prisoner working at a Del Monte facility reported, They threw away more food in a day than my village saw in a month. Peaches rejected for canning because they were slightly small. Tomatoes discarded because of minor blemishes, all of it still perfectly good to eat, all of it fed to animals or plowed under. The waste seemed criminal to us at first. Then we realized it wasn't waste, it was abundance so great that only perfection was acceptable. Sugar beet processing in Colorado and Nebraska revealed agricultural mechanization beyond German achievement. Single American farms produced more sugar beets than entire German regions. Prisoners learned that American sugar production from both cane and beets reached approximately 7 million tons annually, explaining the casual abundance they witnessed in camp mess halls. German production, even before the war, had never approached these levels. The prisoners began to understand that America's power didn't come from superior ideology or racial purity, as Nazi doctrine claimed. It came from superior productivity, from an industrial and agricultural system that could generate abundance without requiring conquest or extraction from occupied territories. When minimum security prisoners ate at American diners under guard supervision, they encountered democratic abundance in its purest form. These small restaurants offered menus that would have graced elite German establishments, yet were available to anyone with modest funds. A prisoner working at a farm near Des Moines, Iowa, recalled, "The farmer took us to a diner for lunch. It was just a small place, nothing special. But the menu had hamburgers, steaks, chicken, sandwiches, soup, pie, ice cream sundaes. The prices were reasonable. A hamburger was 25 cents, pie was 15 cents, and ice cream sundae was 25 cents. I watched as a factory worker in dirty overalls ordered the same steak as a businessman in a suit. The waitress served them identically. No difference in treatment or respect. They paid the same price. They ate the same food." This equality of consumption was something we had never seen in Germany, where restaurants had different sections for different classes. By late 1944, German POWs in America were doing something that seemed impossible: sending food packages to Germany. Using wages earned from work details, prisoners purchased American products to mail home: chocolate bars, instant coffee, and canned goods. International Red Cross records confirm this extraordinary reversal. German prisoners in America sent millions of parcels to Germany during their captivity, most containing food items their families desperately needed. The psychological impact was profound. German families receiving American abundance from imprisoned relatives while they faced starvation in freedom undermined Nazi ideology more effectively than any propaganda campaign. Children in Germany tasted American chocolate sent by fathers who were supposed to be suffering in enemy captivity. Wives received coffee and canned meat from husbands who were eating better as prisoners than their families ate in freedom. The contradiction was undeniable and devastating to Nazi claims of German superiority and American weakness. American rationing, which citizens complained about constantly, revealed the gulf between the societies. Americans grumbled about sugar rationing of 2 pounds monthly per person, more than triple the German allowance when available. American meat rationing at 28 ounces weekly per person exceeded what Germans received monthly. Even with rationing, Americans maintained consumption levels Germans considered impossible luxury. The prisoners did the math. Rationed Americans ate better than unrationed Germans had before the war. What did that say about the relative strength of the two nations?
Spring 1945 brought the final ideological blow. As American forces advanced through Germany, POWs in American camps watched newsreels of GIs distributing chocolate and chewing gum to German children. These children's joy at receiving American candy their own government couldn't provide completed the demolition of Nazi ideology. The contrast couldn't have been starker.
American soldiers advancing through enemy territory carried enough candy to give away to children, while the German state that had promised triumph delivered only starvation. Films of concentration camp liberations showed American troops sharing their own rations with skeletal survivors, demonstrating humanity toward victims of the regime German soldiers had served. One prisoner, watching these newsreels, wrote, "We saw what our government had done, the camps where millions were murdered, and we saw how American soldiers responded, not with revenge, but with food, medicine, compassion. We had fought for evil without knowing it, and we had been defeated by people who were better than us in every way that mattered." Between 1945 and 1946, German POWs returned to a destroyed homeland. Many prisoners had gained significant weight in American captivity, while their families had lost weight to starvation. They brought knowledge of abundance to a land of absolute scarcity. Medical examinations showed German POWs generally returned healthier than when captured, returning to families weakened by deprivation. This physical evidence of American plenty versus German deprivation was undeniable. Many prisoners brought final Red Cross packages home, and chocolate, coffee, and canned goods became family treasures. Children who had forgotten chocolate's taste received Hershey bars from fathers who had eaten ice cream regularly in prison camps. The transformation of German POWs through exposure to American abundance had lasting historical impact. Former prisoners became unexpected advocates for the Marshall Plan, the American program to rebuild Europe after the war. They had witnessed American abundance firsthand and understood it wasn't zero-sum, prosperity through production rather than conquest. Their testimony that Americans could afford to rebuild former enemies influenced German acceptance of American aid. These men understood that American power came from productive capacity, not extraction. They had seen a society wealthy enough to give ice cream to prisoners while fighting a global war. That mental model, prosperity through creation rather than conquest, shaped West Germany's economic approach during Reconstruction. The German economic miracle of the 1950s and 1960s was partially built on knowledge gained in American prison camps. Former POWs who had witnessed American production methods, distribution systems, and consumer abundance applied these lessons to German Reconstruction. They had learned that mass production could make luxuries affordable, that standardization enabled quality and efficiency, that consumer abundance created political stability, and that industrial democracy could outproduce authoritarian control. These lessons, learned through Coca-Cola and ice cream and unlimited sugar, shaped a generation of German business and political leaders. The statistics tell an undeniable story. Average German POW consumption in American camps during 1943 to 1946, 3,300 to 3,600 daily calories, unlimited sugar available in mess halls, 32 ounces of meat weekly, a quart of milk daily when available, ice cream served regularly during summer, soft drinks available at 5 cents each. German civilian rations during the same period, 1,200 to 1,500 daily calories, minimal sugar when available, 10.5 ounces of meat weekly, often unavailable, milk severely rationed, ice cream non-existent, soft drinks unavailable. These weren't propaganda claims, but documented realities preserved in military records, Red Cross reports, and corporate archives. Enemy prisoners ate better than German civilians, proving that American abundance extended even to defeated foes. In post-war interviews and memoirs collected across decades, former German POWs consistently identified food abundance as transformative. A former Africa Corps officer stated in a 1975 interview, "We expected to defeat a weak, divided America. Instead, we found a nation that could give ice cream to enemies. That's when we knew we had lost more than a war. We had lost our entire worldview." Another veteran recalled, "My first Coca-Cola was like drinking the future. It was sweet, fizzing, completely unnecessary, and available to anyone for a nickel. That drink contained everything Nazi Germany wasn't: abundant, democratic, joyful. The story of German POWs discovering American abundance represents one of history's most unusual victories: a war won through generosity, an ideology defeated by ice cream, a worldview shattered by soft drinks. These men arrived believing in German superiority and American weakness. They left understanding that true power came from productive capacity so vast it could waste resources without concern. The society that could give Coca-Cola and ice cream to prisoners while fighting a global war possessed strength beyond military might. That strength came not from conquest or racial superiority, but from freedom, democracy, and an economic system that created abundance for everyone, even enemies. The German POWs, who couldn't believe such prosperity existed, became its greatest witnesses, carrying home the revolutionary truth that democracy tasted sweet and freedom was more powerful than any army.